Hi everyone, I'm Jeanmarie Morosin, Head of Children's Publishing at Hachette Australia. We are incredibly proud to partner with Express Media on the Hachette Australia Prize for Young Writers. I'd like to begin today by showing my respects and acknowledging the Awabakal and Worimi people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which the Newcastle Young Writers Festival meets. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land on which Express Media operates, and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which Hachette Australia operates. I would also like to pay my respects to elders both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are present today. It was an absolute pleasure to read this year's shortlisted entries in the Hachette Australia Prize for Young Writers. Myself and 2023 Ambassador Pip Harry were struck by both the quality of the writing as well as the depth, insight and thoughtfulness of the themes explored across all categories. Congratulations to all of the shortlisted and winning authors.
Thank you, Jeanmarie. I'm Nie, the creative producer at Express Media. We're proud to present the shortlist for the Hachette Australia Prize for Young Writers. This shortlist was selected from over 300 entries from across the country in the categories of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. Chosen by a team of editors from VoiceWorks magazine, all 15 of these pieces impressed us with their skill, intelligence, and strong sense of voice. I'll hand back to Jeanmarie to introduce the shortlisted pieces in each category. Then we'll see a showcase of each of the pieces from the young writers themselves. Lastly, the winners and honorable mentions for each category will be announced by author Pip Harry, who is our 2023 prize ambassador. I hope you enjoy listening to the pieces as much as we enjoyed reading through them.
Hi, and welcome to the fiction shortlist. We were impressed by both the breadth and range of fiction entries this year. From gritty realism to fantasy, the shortlisted entries were ambitious and worked really well as satisfying standalone stories. So huge congratulations to the following shortlisted writers. Iluka de Visser for Senseless from Queensland. Grace Barnes from Victoria for Wilting and Blooming. Naomi Walkham from Western Australia for Sierra's First Flight. Olive Baker from Tasmania for Love with Nowhere to Go. And Grace Sweet from Queensland for Paper Plates. Congratulations.
Senseless, Part 1, Before. Sam was the first to go. It was the middle of maths when he screamed and began to bawl his eyes out. Confused, Emmy asked what was wrong, but all he could do was whimper. Eventually he choked out, "It's so dark," and the teacher could do nothing but send him home. He came back a week later with a white cane like the one my old neighbour had. Georgia was next, and when she returned she never responded to teachers' questions. She couldn't hear anything. Leo was sent home soon after when he stuck his hand into the boiling water for his science experiment and didn't say a word. He never came back. My best friend Lily said something really bad happened and got taken to the camp for troubled kids. The teacher told us that was nonsense, but I wasn't so sure. It was 2 weeks after Chelsea got sent home that the government announced a worldwide emergency. All kids were to stay at school. Permanently. I slept in the classroom that night, surrounded by 36 other kids. Lily and I curled up together in the corner and fell asleep to the low sniffles from around the room. The boys were all snoring heavily, which helped to drown out the crying, but others like Ray had tears streaming down their cheeks. Emmy was comforting them silently. It was dark and cold in the stuffy little room, and it smelled like fear if that was even possible. I missed my mum, my dad, and my big brother Toby more than I ever had in my entire life. I missed my brother's goofy smile, the way he cracked up at every little thing, the silly little skits he used to do with his friend Cam when it was too wet to go outside. I missed my mum's hugs. Man, I even missed my dad's awful dad jokes. But I could do nothing but wait for things to change. When we woke up, the walls were up. They were made of wood, corrugated iron, and a mess of other materials weaved tightly into a solid wall that was 10 meters tall. Soon, food drops became routine, and the helicopter responsible for delivering them, whom we dubbed Flapjack, was our only clue that people still existed outside the wall. We had no choice by then, so we worked together and tried desperately to survive. Soon I turned 10, then 11, Then I began to approach my 12th birthday. During that time, everyone lost a sense. I was lucky and only lost my sense of taste. Many others lost their hearing or sight. There were some kids who couldn't feel, but most of them had been hurt early on and sent home before the wars. Others lost their smell, and I envied them greatly, more so when the boys that were left started hitting puberty. The food drops did not include deodorant. Then, after 3 years and 2 days, the walls fell. There was no hammering, no drills, or clear signs that they would fall. We just woke up and they were sprawled on the ground. But what had not fallen was the fear of the outside world. Our suspicions were skyrocketing, with rumours circulating that the world outside was overrun with aliens or monsters and we were in there for our own protection. But when we peeked outside, there were no aliens. There was no noise. There was nothing. That was when we realised we'd been abandoned. It didn't make sense. Why had the walls fallen when there was nowhere to take them down? None of it made sense. We spent the night at the school again, but just like the first night years ago, there were now no walls, and I wasn't thrilled about that. The boys fell asleep without a care in the world, but I made sure to lock the door before I went to sleep, much to the relief of the younger girls. The classroom I slept in may have been musty, but by now it smelled like home, and that was what scared me the most. The group was used to here, especially the younger kids who barely remembered life before school. It was normal now, and we were not ready to go back to how it used to be. At least, I wasn't. But everyone was restless. Years of waiting to return to our parents, our siblings and friends in other schools made it hard to stay. But no one dared to find out if they were gone for good.
The glass door creaked open, bombarding his senses with cold, damp air, thick with the smell of leaves and dew. He coughed and spluttered, his old knees shaking as he heaved the door fully open, it falling weightlessly shut behind him as he stepped forward onto a floor of mossy tiles. The journey here had been long and treacherous, and he was relieved for it to be over and to finally rest in peace. But as he looked up and around the glassy walls that caressed the glinting moonlight, and saw how they were shadowed by a thick green of darkened life, his chest fell, and he let out a heavy breath. This was not his final destination. Begrudgingly, he lowered his gaze to the maze of green before him. Tall but tired, leafy shapes of dracaena and thin, pointy leaves of agave weaved a myriad of earthy shadows through the eye-line view of the room. The cobbled blue tiles beneath his feet, aged with moss and faded in colour, stretched and split into winding trails, dividing the mess of lethargic green into wooden planters and segmented arrays that one could walk between. As he took in the botany, lazy and limp in the midnight darkness, the old man's attention was caught by a glint of moonlight befalling a small patch of yellow tucked into the planter on his right. He found himself turning and drifting towards it, letting out a soft gasp as he peered down upon the single patch of gold, a spark of life lighting memories like fireworks in his mind.
"The final ball of the season!" screamed a boy, his voice pitchy and croaky. Winnicky releases the ball. It tears through the pitch. The batsman panics, strikes, flicks it into the air. As the ball flew high through the air, the children stopped, looked up, and a young boy started sprinting towards the bushes that lined the oval. Air streaming through his hair, sun draping a sweet river of gold over his face, he dived into the undergrowth, unafraid of impact, as he secured the leather ball in his hand and fell to the leafy bed of shrubs. The children erupted in applause, their praise bringing a smile to the boy's face as he lifted up his head to see a whimsical yellow flower planted right before his face. "Marigolds," the old man croaked, a faint smile dancing on his lips. The spotlight of moonlight flickered and shifting, trailing across the floor and breaking his trance. His wrinkled hand reached to pluck the yellow flower, bringing it close to his chest as he hobbled after the dancing gleam of light.
A trail of sparkles shimmered across the tile floor as the ray of moonlight jumped and skipped across the greenhouse floor and climbed up another patch of garden. Then it stopped, illuminating the petals of a large and leafy purple flower, and the man came to a halt in his tracks.
The amber sun had just risen over Floramead, and the dewdrops began to roll off the leaves. It was the perfect day for the royal family to hold their celebratory picnic. This morning, Sierra would embark on her first flight. She looked in the mirror and saw a delicate pair of silver wings had appeared on her back. Her stomach leapt with excitement as she slipped on a honey-coloured petal dress and rushed outside. Piles of rattan baskets on the jetty overflowed with assorted flaky pastries, colourful fruits and sugary candies for the day's festivities. The mice guards loaded one basket at a time into the walnut shell boats. The carved shells were painted white and gold with a towering mast and flag in front. Although the rest of the family had already received their wings, they still enjoyed taking a boat ride along the Lily River. "See that pile of rocks over there?" Cousin Arnold said giddily. "Try jumping from them." Everyone in the family had taken their first flight from these rocks, everyone except Grandma Thelma, who didn't have wings. Sierra scrambled up the rock that faced the river, her family anxiously looking on. She curled her toes around the uneven edge and bent her knees. With great force, she pushed forward off the platform and seemed to suspend above the crystal blue river. That was before she started to fall. The river drew closer and Sierra squeezed her eyes shut, anticipating the splash, but it never came. Cautiously, she opened her eyes and found herself hovering just above the water's surface. In the corner of her vision, she saw a flickering silver blur. A cheer arose from the boats behind her, and she was soon overtaken by the fleet of golden sails. "Come on, Sierra, the fairy snails fly faster than you," Auntie Henrietta chuckled. A gust of wind picked up behind her and propelled Sierra forward. Soon she was in front of her family's boats and speeding into the distance. The pale blue sky in front of her was speckled with cotton-like clouds, and the Lily River extended into the horizon. Sierra peered down and saw clusters of lily pads and ombres of pink flowers. Looking closer, she swore she saw a lily pad jump. How unusual! Sierra decided to fly down to have a look. As she got closer, she realized it wasn't the lily pads that had jumped, but the frogs. A whooshing noise on her left caught her attention. She glanced sideways and was met with a flock of flying snails in a kaleidoscope of colours. They rushed past her, and as it turned out, flying snails were faster than they looked. Sierra was tossed sideways and downwards, causing her to lose her orientation. Her head was spinning, and she found herself hurling toward the river. Sierra spiraled down in a tangle of limbs and ruffled fabric before the sapphire water engulfed her. Iridescent bubbles suspended in the water next to her and reflected the green lily pad stems surrounding her. She surrendered her weight to the water and slowly floated up toward the rippling yellow of the sun. There Sierra was met with many pairs of eyes. Frogs sat on the lily pads around her and gave her inquisitive looks. A small lily pad with a purple flower unfurled in front of her, and she clambered on. The water rolled off her rose-petal dress, unlike her hair, which stuck to her face like sap to a tree. As Sierra wrung out her tangled hair, she heard a choked sob behind her. She turned around to face a sad little frog who was sharing a lily pad with another, larger frog. "What's the matter?" Sierra asked. The little frog sniffled. "An ugly old toad has taken our lily pads and blocked the river." All the frogs nodded in agreement. "We should throw pebbles at him until he moves," said the large frog. "Or we could cut the lily pad so that he falls in the river," replied another. "What awful suggestions," Sierra said, shocked. "Have you simply asked him to move?"
Hi, I'm Olive Baker, and today I'm going to be reading my short story, Love with Nowhere to Go. The crisp morning air is sliced through by my ebony black wings. A glint of light beneath me catches my eye, the sun, bouncing off the daybreak dew, glossed across a curved arched stone. one of many within the cemetery to perch upon. The overgrown grass grazes the sides of the gravestone as a breeze lightly wisps between each blade. The earth and rubble has been freshly turned over from beneath and settles below the stone, unlike those surrounding it, the dirt sunken into the ground over time. A chilling atmosphere meanders throughout, as if although your surroundings may seem completely empty, and you may be the only one around, you can just feel you aren't alone. I sing a low, quiet call as I strut among the grass, passing by each stone and plucking fresh worms and insects from the filth. I find myself drawn back to the first one I had settled upon. I sit, surrounded by the peaceful aura of the cemetery, a crow's true calling to, and somewhat a haven to one like myself. I discover a somewhat fresh carcass, presumably a wallaby. Perfect food for the murder. I swoop along to the familiar trees and branches I call home. All is well as I return with nutrition, and we all prepare for the coming day. I return to the cemetery the next morning, in search of more sustenance to provide to my family. I hop around and scavenge some more food for everyone back at the nest, an extra for the youngest, one of my own. He is the last to have left the nest, and is still yet to do so. I fear for him. He seems to be so fatigued recently. He must be unwell. As my hunt comes to an end, I find myself again brought towards the stone I had previously visited. I sit for a while, observing humans passing by, laying flowers, perhaps even talking to the stone as if it were their own loved one, as they used to be before they had lost them. Watching all of these people united in grief, compelled to come back for those they had spent so long with and were now lost, was so heart-shattering, yet also so touching in one. After a few more days of flying in and around the cemetery, I had become progressively more worried about my son and his declining condition, and I am more and more drawn towards that specific headstone plaguing my paths. I've lately been trying to resist. I mustn't waste time, but I can no longer help it. I return to the stone. There's such a delicate aura to it that it draws me toward it. As I sit, I watch a woman with black draped over her body slowly drift in my direction. She bears flowers. I realize that I've spent far too long away from the nest as the sun begins to fade into the horizon, but my intrigue overpowers any sense of urgency. I soon realize that this woman is headed towards where I'm sitting. She kneels down, flowers in hand. She props them down against the stone. Her mouth opens, as if to say something, but nothing comes out. Choked up, she begins to talk to the stone, as if to say everything she hadn't gotten to before she'd lost someone. After a singular tear trickles down her cheek and drops to the ground, she can no longer contain herself. A crumpled heap before me, she gazes upward at me. She doesn't know what to do, but nobody else is around, so I suppose it makes sense to relieve your sorrows. If it's merely a crow, and that's who she must tell, so it be. I listen to her. She may not be aware of it, but I hang off of each and every word. It was her son. The look of desperation plastered across her face was like none I had never seen before. She was like a hollow, caved-out version of the woman she would have been. When I fly home afterwards, I cast my mind back to her and hope for the best. I cannot even begin to comprehend the immense sorrow she must feel.
Heavy, dense clouds finally move forward on the horizon after 1,859 days of drought. At first, the gentle pitter-patter sounds like the corrugated iron roof expanding under the sun. It's only when drops run down the window that I bother looking up. The heavens open up, and water pours into empty tanks, streams down hills, and pools on top of the dusty ground. An earthy scent drifts up, and the sharp smell of eucalyptus layers the air, as the gums sigh with relief. It's like suddenly I'm seeing the world through a lens finally focusing. Shapes sharpen, no longer blending, and colours emerge that I'd forgotten existed. I reach my hand out the window. Drops of water prick my fingers, similar to the pricking of my ears at the sound of my father's sobs that morning 1,427 days ago. The first time I saw my father cry, my world became a little darker and a little more frightening. His gentle face hardened as he forced off an emotion he didn't want witnessed. Throwing his hat to the ground, he kicked the dust that used to be green pasture. Tears streaked down his face, creating grooves and crevices that mirrored the land around us. A moth flapped in my windpipe. He'd taken a risk, keeping on the 1,500 head of cattle, praying for a break in the weather. He'd lost the gamble. I watched as he entered the shed, the furrows on his forehead growing deeper, his lips pressed into a thin, straight line. Placing the shotgun in the back of his ute, his face was one of grim resolve. Gunshots rang through the air that afternoon at a steady beat, like the rhythm of a funeral march, each one sending a shudder through my body. That was the first day of 432, where Dad was forced to wash blood from his hands, never having enough water to scrub it from beneath his fingernails. He became more like a shadow than a man in the passing months, as the land scarred, clawing itself for water. Hills shifted into mounds of dirt, and a faint breeze threatened to cover everything in a layer of dust. Mighty trees became skeletons, and animals roadkill as they ventured to lick dew off the bitumen road. We showered in town at a friend's house that morning. Though Dad got the dirtiest, he never joined us for this new habit. They tried to make their cheerfulness infectious, but clutching at our toiletries bags, it was hard to offer anything but weak smiles. Eventually, the water turned brown and stank of mud as the town dam shrank to a puddle. Mistrust in the world settled in further each day we went without rain, and I learnt that life has no certainties and nothing in Australia is done in moderation. Cruel, dark clouds taunted the dry, cracked land as they banked on the horizon, but no one said they'll think it'll rain. Only the visiting citygoers would venture to make such a foolish and risky observation. Mum saw a flyer for free water at the showgrounds, and while in town we joined the long line that snaked down the street. Each car contained grief-stricken faces, though no one had died, and looking at my mum's grey-lined one, I realised we didn't look all that different. We reached the front, and a woman who called us darlin' and lovey commanded 2 men to fill our boot with 15-litre containers of water. Mum and I carried the plastic tub that served as our sink outside in the evening, the heat of the day threatening to evaporate any water before a plant could soak it up. If any of the grey, murky water sloshed over the rim, Mum would let out a sharp, "Careful!" Her prize-winning rose bushes greedily sucked up any moisture. I noticed the edge of their leaves starting to curl and brown. I learnt the difference between necessity and luxury. Water is a necessity, and 10 heirloom rose bushes a luxury. Dad came home late that night, expressions flickering across his face as constant as waves on the surface of the ocean, his dinner cold on the paper plate. Lying in bed, I could feel the world move beneath me and clearly perceive our house becoming out of rhythm. The chasm between my parents grew bigger each passing day as the hope for rain diminished. My skin was sticky beneath the sheets. I could feel each layer of dirt and sweat distinctly. At night, my thoughts ran a million miles an hour. A farmer had died in a single vehicle car crash the previous night. He went out at 11 p.m. and just drove, crashing into a tree 20 minutes from their house. Whispers circled down the hallways at school for weeks. While inside, the silence was deafening. Outside, barks of wild, hungry dogs and pitiful mews of weak cows echoed through our property. Dad yelled a curse, a weight curling into the pit of my stomach, and he stomped outside, the ute skidding away. Mum called his name. The air bit at my lungs as I forced myself to breathe normally. I could hear her crying in the room next door, and I wanted to go out, but my limbs were tense, as if a spring had been wound up inside me, and thoughts flew through my mind, not a single one slowing enough for me to comprehend any. Shouting carried through my open window, the words indistinguishable. A horn blared, and dogs barked. A single gunshot jolted me out of my stupor, and I raced outside, into the arms of Mum, curling into her lap. The night was silent at last. Together, we waited up for Dad, fear choking any words we would use to comfort one another. A far-off rumble of a ute pushed Mum from the chair and onto the front porch. She cried and screamed at him when he emerged from the dark vehicle. In the morning, a wild dog was strung up by its hind leg outside our long driveway. I hear laughter outside, the sound foreign to my ears. Looking out, I watch as Mum and Dad dance in dirty puddles, splashing grainy water at each other. The moth in my throat gives way to a giggle, and I join them outside.
I was so delighted to be asked to be the Hachette Australia Prize for Young Writers Ambassador this year, and even more delighted to read the diverse and daring works that were shortlisted in this year's award. I'm so excited to announce the winners and the honourable mentions in each category, so here we go. In the fiction category, there was tons of imagination and really clever ideas from this group of talented young writers. You explored themes of death, climate change, love, family, and connection in super creative stories that range from dystopia to fantasy, cli-fi, and spec fic. The winner in this category was Paper Plates by Grace Sweet from Queensland. Grace wrote an unforgettable portrait of an Australian town devastated by severe drought. It's written with restraint and a lack of sentimentality. It's taut and tense and full of haunting sentences that perfectly capture the dryness and the desperation of the farmers forced to kill their stock due to unrelenting climate change. A twist ending is lined with hope and humanity. Congratulations, Grace. The honourable mention in this category was Senseless by Iluka Devissa in Queensland. This was a wonderful concept and fantastic writing as a group of students find themselves locked down in schools as they each lose one of their senses. This is crisp, well-paced and peppered with black humour, but it holds family and friendship at its heart. Well done, Iluka.
The entries in the non-fiction category this year all had a strong voice and point of view. I was struck by the vulnerability in each of the entries, and Pip and I both were impressed by the authenticity that elevated the writing from straight essay to something more personal and engaging. Congratulations to the shortlisted authors. From Western Australia, Micah Santos for Aftermath of Dear Mum and Dad. Faradzo Marunda from Tasmania for Relaxed is the New Uncomfortable. Jennifer Lee from New South Wales for On Wednesdays We Degrade Asian Women. And Abhinav Ravi from New South Wales for Fragmented Reflections, South Asian Australian Identity. And from New South Wales, Asha Miller for Pocketbook. Congratulations, everyone, and apologies if I've mispronounced your name.
Hi, I'm Mika Santos. I'm from Borloo, Western Australia, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my submission for the Hachette Australia Prize for Nonfiction, Aftermath of Dear Mum and Dad. Every time I thought about my coming out letter, I remembered its weight. It was one I imposed myself to make it beautiful. Not to make it overly grandiose and liberate myself from the professional judgment of my writing as too ornate, indelibly forced, but to construct something that had magnitude and capable of dismissal. I couldn't have it just be something my family could stand to think about. My queerness, left unspoken for so long, deserved nothing less. My friends, older and wider and thus individualistic by nature, were slightly critical about this need for perfection, cultivated since childhood but blatantly exercised in a deliberation of my words, terms, phrases. Queer? Lesbian? How nuanced is Tagalog to have more than 2 words for gay? Stop asking if they'll continue to love you. To them, it was an acknowledgement that unabashed queerness needed refinement. That was shedding sincerity with every rewrite. I scoffed and returned to my second and third drafts. My motives remained inexplicable. A letter wasn't an elaborate coming out gesture, but I believed there wasn't going to be any less merit than if I had gone for the clever and ostentatious. I was admittedly eager for work, sending my resumes in person in a blistering Perth heat, but not with the gratifying purchase of an "I'm gay" coffee mug as a purpose in mind. A letter, more so the obsession with which I wrote it over and over, was not just inflexible formality, it was immaculate. It made me ambitious, ambivalent towards funny and raw. I didn't want to make footnotes. I wanted to make being gay easier to understand, to approve of without my unrestrained verbosity, intricate enough to extricate it from the prejudices and verses recited in Catholic condemnation. I wanted my parents' Asian ignorance retired and assimilated into a definitively Australian culture of acceptance and belonging. I didn't believe these to be unreasonable. They only looked damn nice to have. There was never going to be a right time. Even when I decided to go all in, Mom still apprehended me in the kitchen sink days before I was due to call them all into the living room. I could not remember how she had found out. She may have been put on by the chismosas, become another private scrutinizer of my mouth and legs not fused into mere femininity, or I was just allowing her too much good judgment when she had found the letter crumpled in my jacket pocket. I could not applaud her for being clever. I couldn't do anything else in my body's resentment. I was circumscribed to the spite that fell clumsily from my mouth, the sight I willfully imagined of Mum's name erased from the page. Without the letter, my eloquence eluded me, and I let her plea for secrecy become indiscernible over the running water, unanswered as I walked away, unable to save myself. I refuted my friends' consoling offers to live with them, not wanting any stupid hopes of salvation to seep through the screen. Perhaps any enchantment I could have had with their lavish homes was broken with a quiet inferiority complex. I had a gate that was tough to climb over, they had dogs that scared me to death. What was also to consider was how much I didn't want to run away after all, that I wanted neither part of me to die. It was undeniable to me how much I wanted my courage regained to make this work for our family, our culture, again and again. Thank you.
Relaxed is the new uncomfortable. My first-hand experiences as a first-generation Australian of Zimbabwean heritage. The term Australians are laid back is more confusing than comforting. The use of the word Australians indicates every single person living on Australian soil is relaxing. When you search Laid Back Australia, you view endless URL links from international perspectives praising Australia's relaxed attitude. From what I can see, there is a clear misconception between which Australians are relaxing and aren't relaxing. Some Australians are at a luxury spa, whilst others are at the beach, fighting off the sand and hiding from the pestering seagulls. Some Australians are receiving facials, whilst others are trying to relax but are constantly being waterboarded by the rips. Recent times have revealed that being laid back is synonymous to not caring. Because caring means concern, and concern does not fit the Australian aesthetic. Australia's no-care attitude can be admirable until we slap this attitude on every single issue we face as a community. Most Australians follow the life path of receiving an education, securing a job, then moving into a house and raising a family. For some Australians, their skin colour and ethnic background set them 10 steps backwards from achieving these milestones. How are these Australians meant to celebrate and parade through life when 1 in 5 kids experience racism at school? How are these Australians meant to flourish in their community when majority experience racism at work, supermarkets, and their own neighbourhoods? So, try your best to enlighten those who are at the beach to sit back and not care, because now they're becoming uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong, Australia's multicultural society creates a harmonic atmosphere in our nation. Such harmony is evident in this headline that so graciously proves that amidst the vulnerability all Australians were reckoned with during coronavirus, we remained harmonious. Asian Australians threatened and spat on in racist incidents amid coronavirus. Since Australians must uphold their relaxed nature, the most they will do is thumbs down this article on Facebook. We can't care too much, as that starts to confirm the existence of issues in our society, which means we need to address it, which is not relaxing behaviour at all. We must ignore this incredibly serious problem and brush it under the rug, even though you can see the mess starting to poke out. We must maintain our relaxed posture. The assumption that everyone is living this stress-free mindset is undermining the realities minorities of Australia are living. The laid-back culture is adamant that xenophobia is truly not that big of a deal yet. It's easier for some Australians to think everyone is at a luxury spa to avoid taking off their eye mask to see the bigger problem. Being laid back is communicating the idea of ignorance. Some Australians really don't care to the point where they don't realise they are making other Australians feel uncomfortable. The uncomfortableness experienced by minorities in Australia is often located at the butt of a joke. Some Australians weaponise their relaxation to downplay the offensiveness of their joke, followed by the common phrase, "it was just a joke." But starting the joke off with, "an Australian, Indian and Asian men walk into a bar," is just a confirming sign that they do not care about people's comfortableness. Some Australians just care about making a casually racist joke to display to everyone that they are so laid back they can make jokes about sensitive topics. It is frightening to be unaware of how unserious we may become to sensitive topics. Relaxation is desensitising Australians to the seriousness of discrimination and the urgency to act against this issue. The sand is starting to stick, the sun is getting hotter, and the rips are getting stronger. Some Australians aren't relaxing anymore.
On Wednesdays, we degrade Asian women. Mean Girls. Since its release in 2004, the teen comedy remains legendary and undoubtedly the most quoted teen film to this day. I remember watching Mean Girls for the first time, raving about how iconic it was with my friends. I loved it. Everything from the outfits to the characters to the Jingle Bell Rock dance. For weeks, I couldn't stop quoting lines from the movie. It was catchy, fun, and so fetch. It wasn't until I rewatched it recently that I realized how problematic it really was. Were the two Asian teenage girls fighting over the pedophilic male sports coach necessary for the plot of the movie? The movie itself was and still is an icon. However, as an Asian teenage girl myself, the casual racism throughout the movie and underlying hypersexualization of the cool Asians for comedic purposes made me wince uncomfortably. Asian women have been subjected to unfair stereotyping and underrepresentation in the media. The oversimplification of Asian identity dates back to the 20th century, where thousands of East Asian women were forced into prostitution as young as 14. This is evident through the Korean War, 1950, and the Vietnam War, 1955, where commercialization of the sex industry in U.S. military bases prompted the birth of the hypersexualization of Asian women. Consequently, the generalization of all Asian women being sexually desirable or submissive has led pop culture to represent Asian women as incompetent and fragile foreigners, exotic femme fatales, and subservient mail-order wives. This has resulted in a lack of authenticity in cultural representation of Asian women. Hollywood plays a large role in hypersexualizing Asian women and often reinforces derogatory representations of Asian women and culture. The lotus blossom trope, otherwise known as China doll, is a common trope that reappears in Hollywood time and time again. It depicts Asian women as disposable objects of desire and defines them through their feminine fragility and sexually submissive traits. This harmful stereotypical generalization is shown in Mean Girls, where the film manifests two Asian high school girls who are portrayed as promiscuous and lewd. The two Vietnamese girls, Trang Pak and Sun Jin Din, each have minor roles but share two distinctive traits: hooking up with the football coach and being unable to speak English, promoting extremely misleading stereotypes of Asian women in film. Frankly, the names of Trang Pak and Sun Jin Din are not even accurate. They're a combination of Korean, Chinese, and Vietnamese names. The names Trang and Din are both Vietnamese, however Pak is a Korean surname, and Sun and Jin are Chinese names. But of course, that doesn't matter because they're all Asian names, right? Another popular trope is the dragon lady who is known for being cunning and deceitful. She is characterized by her dangerous but sexual allure and is notorious for having a strong, dominant, mysterious nature. A contemporary example of the dragon lady is Alex Monday in Charlie's Angels, who was used to lure men away so that angels could achieve their goal. Monday wore a tight, revealing black leather suit and carried a whip, perfectly aligning with the domineering edge that is the hallmark of the dragon lady trope. Alex Monday is essential to the team because of her intellect, skill, and sexuality. Little attention is paid to her personality. Instead, her cold, calculating attributes are emphasized, to suggest Monday as a mere sexual temptation for the male gaze.
In the vast tapestry of human existence, the Australian immigrant experience stands as a richly nuanced narrative, intertwining threads of cultural heritage, resilience, and self-discovery. For a 15-year-old queer South Asian Australian like myself, this journey has been an odyssey, defined by the exploration of sexuality and the stigma surrounding it. mental health and the lack of resources put out for people of colour, and what it truly means to be Australian in an ever-changing world characterised by the elusive idea of diversity. As a first-generation immigrant, my family's arrival on foreign shores was laden with dreams of a better life and opportunities for success. Amidst the questionable side-eyes from nuclear white families and the bustling streets of New South Wales, the reality of navigating cultural assimilation and preserving our roots revealed itself slowly. The process was complex, and often it led to a delicate balancing act between embracing the new and cherishing the old. A rite of passage undergone by countless immigrant children, the mocking of cultural food at school was one of my many humbling experiences that marked the start of the so-called assimilation my family and I desperately seek. I recall kids gagging and complaining about the smell of my lunches to my teacher, and crying to my mother about it later in the evening. She would say, "That's nothing for you to worry about. Who cares?" For someone who underwent such apparent hardship to get to this land of opportunity and freedom, I was appalled to hear these words come from her mouth. Was this truly meant to be? My views about my family changed exponentially over the course of my childhood, and when reading or discussing other immigrant families, it was easy to be able to empathize with them. Gosh, they've come such a long way, or they really deserve the lives they're living now. Look how hard they've worked. But when I looked at my family, all I could see were their failures. In my own and many other people's experiences, immigrant families have always been afraid of their children assimilating into Western culture, namely Australian society. I can still hear my parents screeching at my older sister over her decision to move out in her 20s. Do we not give you enough? We raised you with our values, not these rubbish sentiments that your friends have. By classing our emotions and ideas as rubbish sentiments, I was made sure of the implications that would come with being an immigrant child seeking more than the four walls I was kept in. There are standards held for us South Asian immigrants to uphold. We must master our native tongue whilst also being proficient in English, wear traditional clothing and follow belief systems that often go against our own values. But the act of assimilation is not immediate. I won't not continue to devour a mug of chai my dad brews every evening, nor will I stop continuing to watch Tamil movies at the cinema. My culture makes me the person who I am, and even if I listen to Beyonce on the train or have a night out with friends, I will still respect my elders and give back to my community. These are traditions and values that I will forever hold on to. It is the act of suppression and constant fear of change that propels my family and many other diasporas around the world to have such beliefs, to behave as such, and often paves the way, especially in my case, for intergenerational trauma to fester and seep through the pores of what was once considered a structured family unit, but has now been reduced to a dysfunctional set of people living under one roof. As my family settled into a quaint suburb in the inner west of Sydney, ready to start their nuclear family, my older sister and I quickly realized that mental health, an enigmatic facet of the human condition, proved to be a defining aspect of my journey. Navigating the transition from the familiar to the foreign was a crucible of emotions, and the weight of my parents' expectations bore heavily on the shoulders of my sister and I. The pressures to excel academically and also succeed professionally clashed with the Australian mindset that I possessed. For me, it was all about what I liked, not what the world liked. In the land down under, my parents came here and believed that the opportunities they seek out for their children were based on what they knew, unlike in India, where it was about who you knew. They certainly weren't wrong, but their openness to the fact itself was under speculation. As many immigrant children can agree, immigrant parents can view Western ideals such as smoking, drinking, and same-sex marriage as completely okay, as long as their own children were not involved in it. The mindset stems from the tunnel vision that many South Asians themselves possess. Rather than opening towards the plethora of opinions that the world has, limiting yourself to your own goals and success has been a concept that underpins my upbringing in Australia. That is not to say that all South Asians are selfish and do not care for others, but the thought of one's own culture being preserved from the pollution of Western ideals is something that South Asian immigrant identity heavily centers around.
As a woman, pockets are not something of which I have an abundance,
No, contemporary society and the capitalist regime have determined that if I want to store my wallet, my notebook, or my pen anywhere, it shall not be in my pockets. Instead, I need to go out of my way to find an additional space to store my essential items, because the powers that be would rather save on stitches than provide a woman with practical clothing. Unfortunately, many women have, in the past, found that women's fashion is not the only place where they lack functional pockets, lacking considerably more significantly a room of their own, from which to read, to write, to express their experiences, fears, or dreams. Instead, they have been held in the highly impractical pocket of patriarchy, whose unremitting grasp dictates that not only will the voices and words of these women be forever denied the opportunities to mark the pages of history, but as a result we today shall never be able to read these pages, to learn or understand the experiences of these women, from which to further develop a sense of our own place within history. It is the Wordsworths, the Einsteins, and the Mozarts of the world whose voices have been silenced. No, not the Williams, Alberts, or Wolfgangs, but the lesser known, though perhaps no less talented if not for the meddling hands of patriarchy, Dorothys, Milevas, and Marias, the sisters and wives of those that we call great who have been made again and again, as Coretta Scott King once said, to sound like attachments to a vacuum cleaner. Dorothy, a poetess and prose writer, whose writing was appropriated by Wordsworth, without credit to her. Mileva, a physicist an exam away from a doctorate when she fell pregnant with Einstein's daughter and had to cease studying, and Maria, a celebrated harpsichordist who travelled and performed with her brother to much acclaim until she turned 18 and was forced to stop performing, expected instead to marry. Tucked into the pockets of history, unseen and unheard, each of these women tried to write a story, attempted to send the wonders of their minds out into the world, yet were thwarted in their attempts, spurned by a society unwilling or perhaps unprepared to read such a book, a society without space for women, identities reduced to victims of a hegemonic narrative. But surely, I hear you reason, times have changed with new technology and updated society, the perfect opportunity to raise a mic to the mouths of the previously silenced by researching, writing, and sharing their stories. Have times changed, though? Because, you see, with new technology comes heightened awareness and a brand new political agenda, and from the ashes a new problem has arisen, the fear of cultural appropriation, and a society dictated by a fear of not being politically correct enough. Because after centuries of a single group being privileged above all others, at the expense of all others, of a monocultural discourse purporting to be inclusive and representative of the experiences of those it hardly knows, it's no wonder that almost every individual who isn't a middle to upper class, cisgender and heterosexual white male might trademark their experiences and desire that they be the only ones to write them for fear of being misrepresented perpetually. But what does this mean for the historically silenced? For the Wordsworths, Einsteins, and Mozarts mentioned earlier? If they couldn't write their experiences because society wouldn't let them, yet no one alive today will dare step foot into another individual's mindscape, then have we destined their voices to be silenced forever? By attempting to be inclusive, to make room for every voice to be heard, have we unwittingly thrown out the voices of the past, the voices of individuals who worked incredibly hard to be heard, to be respected for their work in even the smallest way? For most of history, Anonymous was a woman.
In the non-fiction category, there was an impressive collection of personal and critical essays examining self-image, identity and belonging, feminism, censorship, racism and the migrant experience. All the writers displayed intelligent and insightful writing using relevant research and sources. The winner in this category was Fragmented Reflections, South Asian Australian Identity by Abhinav Ravi in New South Wales. The judges were absolutely captivated by this wonderfully honest and brave personal essay that examined sexuality, identity, self-acceptance and belonging. It was thoughtful and moving writing that blended the personal and the universal. Congratulations. The honourable mention in this category is Aftermath of Dear Mum and Dad by Micah Santos in WA. This was a thoughtful, deeply personal piece that examined the pain of choosing love and self-acceptance over familial and religious ties. It highlighted the importance of language in delivering a message of hope and understanding. Congratulations.
I'm a huge poetry fan and I eagerly anticipate the poetry entries in this prize every year, and I can honestly say they get better every year. We were so impressed by the use of technique, form and powerful imagery in the shortlisted entries in the category this year. So congratulations to the following shortlisted poets. Fig Rusin Jorgensen from Victoria for Girlfish. Lotus Daz Highland from Victoria for 2 hours 36 minutes. Layla Natsis from Victoria for Haze. Jasmine Cullen from Western Australia for The Prologue of My Childhood. And from New South Wales, Ryan Chen for I Live on a Broken Rock. Congratulations, everybody.
Hi, I'm Fig and this is Girlfish. I am a girlfish, smooth, seal-bodied, submerged with my nose above the waterline, sun-baked back, supine to burn and colour fade, conch-shaped mouth, clutch me to your ear to hear a muttering about a cranium sea. Taste my salt, temper my bareness, hold me under, try to drown me, and I will show you. You will see when I wash up, as loud and as pink-cheeked as the day you pulled me from the water. Search for me, look behind you in seagull calls and between sandy legs. Kiss me, for then my gills will close, my senses will sharpen, and I will become a girl.
There's a baby crying, screaming and writhing as I stare directly into the sun. Purple sweet potato clouds with a halo godly orange and sinking. My phone went dark, unable, so I tried to commit the scene to memory. I traced every moving line with my eyes, like a perfect, fleeting painting, like I did with a rhinestone necklace, acne scars, and the cakey makeup of the man on the train. I stare at it and wait for it to go away, like I do with everything I love and am afraid of. A satellite or a celestial body mocks me from above. There comes a point where it seems a savanna, deep bruised shrubbery below a blazing horizon, golden candy floss above, and the long metallic wing stretches out, the silver giant we built. Flight is only a theory, which is a comforting thought. Nobody knows how I can dream this oily masterpiece through heavy eyes. And everybody hates one another, so we don't tell each other the endings of bad movies. I thought I saw stars, but it was a reflection. Humans make a face out of nothing, craving in slices of bread and electrical outlets. It's gone fuzzy now, like how I feel when I see my friends, like my memories of my childhood. My pinky finger has gone numb, and my cheeks are cold. The baby cries again. Chapped lips approach.
Wilting bones, I water them still. The curtain falls, and silken moonlight spills onto watercolour limbs, leaking and lucent, moving eternally as she dips her wings in the glacier air. A cobweb bejewelled by the sky's jewel. When I look at her, it feels like grains of sand slipping through the cracks of a giant's hand. Gold embroidered into the sap of her skin, molten and gleaming. Wildflowers compressed, whimpering. She's waiting for the stars to fall asleep, and then they'll be hers to keep. Misty eyes, coiling smoke, clots, coats, glistening throat, violet, ripening, breath that wants to crawl out, the spirals tightening. Sea swallow me, the moonlight dies, the curtain closes, and I'm drowning. She is but a transient dream, a euphoric sheen, an unravelling thread woven into the tapestry of the dead. Constellations bleeding, clouds weeping. I never felt so alive. Oh mother, I'm sick of breathing.
The Prologue of My Childhood by Jasmine Cullen. Summer is innocence. Prologue by the lick of sea foam, interlaced hands, the Wicklow fields littered by daisy corpses. You ran to meet me like the river runs to meet the tide, and our lives intertwine. Question-framed lips and billowing curls escaping the hem of my hat, and to be little is to not know, yet the knowledge festered and curled like smoke in my belly. That I would hoard those moments like trinkets to turn over in sun-kissed light, the threshold between becoming and not knowing how to unbecome. To remain unmarked by the shifting cycle of change. Rusty swing sets and we were drinking the sun, and in that moment I am not yet an exile from my childhood home, my constellation. Smiles, one too-deep gapped and dimpled, the other waning willow tree withered. When my head dips under bed, I look for the permanence before the monsters. Too young for my tongue to wrap around each syllable of your name, and too young to understand. My girlhood is bathwater slipping down the gurgling throat of a drain, yawn brief and volatile. Innocence died in the heat of summer, and you were an urn of slaughtered possibilities, a metaphor of flames turned bitter cold with age. Your absence is cradling my grief armless, your touch an apparition of montaged moments. There is nothing ornamental about love. She is not the seashell you robbed from the beach. She is spiny, grinned, and briary. She is the spectral breath of a graveyard, the swollen burst of heart against ribs, the distant sound of laughter from the other room. What a deep-rooted mockery to live in all the places you do not. What an entrenched torment. You're an ellipsis with no conclusion, and now I do not know how to finish my own sentence. Tell me how to sign the autobiography of my existence when you do not hold the pen. Summer was innocence, and she ended like the preface of a love letter.
In the morgue of my mind, the sands aren't yellow. Instead, they are a mix of bone and blood that shift in ancient geometries. The water comes and goes like breathing, as I watch a small grain swept down in little streams and lost in the tempest. My home lives underneath, in collected dust that stains the white and augments the rust. Sweep it under the rug. Discover language and tradition, carved wooden tables and cold marble floors, prism windows that diffract only for me, a palace of crystal walls and plastered doors. And the world's gods will never see the sick and dirt we seep away in our house, our home, our safe place. I don't know where mine is. Then, the water that floods up and recedes, curling and smoking eddies, the rocks that cut deep valleys in the beach, a shifting ocean and a red sky whose edges mesh together, a wave that is nothing but broken across the sand, a line where grass pokes above, beyond a horizon clear, a shattered glass that used to be so full. Grounded in solitude, grope at the spilt water, at bone and tears, and sweep it under the rug. Where does the storm cry? You, warlord, with the expensive teacups and extravagant furniture, built this house on your stones, and on your stones you guide as I slowly scratch my name into place in neat, tractable cursive.
The poetry category showcased searching poets with a remarkable command of language as they explored the pain and beauty of human existence from all angles. They used powerful lyrical lines to present themes of lost innocence, childhood, liminal spaces, grief, longing, and growth. The winner in this category is Girlfish by Fig Russin Jorgensen in Victoria. The judges loved the clear, precise imagery in this poem, which examined themes of rebirth and our connection to the sea, with beautiful and unexpected language choices. The honourable mention in this category was The Prologue of My Childhood by Jasmine Cullen in WA. This was a powerful and unsettling ode to lost innocence and childhood that was striking in its unusual structure and language choices. This talented poet shows remarkable depth and maturity with themes of memory, grief, loss, decay, and dissatisfaction. Congratulations to both these young poets.
Huge congratulations to all the shortlisted authors, and many thanks to the people who made this prize possible. Thank you to Hachette Australia for supporting this prize, Pip Harry for being its ambassador, and the National Young Writers Festival for programming the winner's announcement in their festival lineup. Thank you to our wonderful readers, Seb Petroni, Joe Keith, Stella Theocharides, and Sam Himawan, who went through each and every submission with care and attention. And a huge thank you to everyone who submitted a piece for this year's prize. It takes courage to show your work to the world and have it be judged by others. Regardless of whether you were shortlisted or not, you've done a brave thing. I hope this is only the beginning of your journey as writers. I hope your imagination continues to run wild, that your craft grows with you, and that you find the courage to share your work with others over and over again. The world still needs dreamers. As Ursula Le Guin said, you are the realists of a larger reality. Thank you.